Good.
It says recording in progress.
Yeah, you don't have to record it yet though. Hi, Ken.
Okay.
You can stop it and then start. We'll start in a little bit. I'll tell you.
Okay.
Okay.
At Gigi. There we go. Thank you. So just a brief introduction. Ken Siri is a CFA, a self-direction broker, a mentor, author, and autism advocate. He is the single father of a young adult son with autism, who I think he mentioned we could hear in the background.
Yeah.
Ken spent 20 years on Wall Street as a healthcare and technology analyst and is the author of Cutting-Edge Therapies for Autism. He currently manages an impressive caseload of 125 clients and has a wealth of knowledge to share on the topic of self-direction. So this is the third presentation that Ken has done with us at Gigi's. This particular presentation is geared towards reviewing a self-direction budget template and discussing fund allocations. And there will be plenty of opportunity for Q&A. So I would say if you have questions, feel free to just put them in the chat throughout and we'll try to address them, or you can also ask them at the end. And if you were not able to attend the first or second sessions, which provided a lot of background information, we did record those as well, and they're posted on the Gigi's YouTube channel, but I will paste those links into the chat for anyone who wants to refer to those sessions. So I think Ken wants us to be really interactive, so feel free to raise your hand, jump in with questions, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I mentioned when hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here again, Gigi's. This is all these talks that we've done are meant to be interactive. And this one's totally new. I don't even have a presentation. I'm going to show you guys an Excel file, which is the budget, which you probably are familiar with, but if not, you'll get to like it because it means money. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people don't like it. I was kind of saying before, they don't like templates, but really it's about dollars, right? And that's kind of what you want to get. So I'm going to share my screen with the template. It's so you folks should be aware, but if not, maybe you weren't told or communicated to yet, but there's a new budget template that came out. So I'm going to be showing you the old template. You probably can't tell the difference when you look at it. Really, this new template that came out, there's a cost of living increase that OPWDD gave. So these same numbers would be 5.4% larger. If we're on a new template, I'm not going to bother like cleaning up a new template because again, it's from the mechanics of it is the same. But periodically, when OPWDD is going to make changes to the budgets, like give you a cost of living increase or change the calculation that would potentially increase someone's housing allowance, which was also part of this template, they basically redo the budget template. It's just an Excel file that they have a lot of macros in, and it's protected, so you can't edit it yourself, and you can't see all the calculations. So you can play with, you can play with it, and that's kind of what we're going to do today. But just so you know, whenever they're going to make a change to the budget, they have to put out the new template first, and then once the new template's out, you can get a budget increase or these changes to maybe a category, or like in this case, again, the housing increase. You can get that when you do a budget amendment. It doesn't just automatically happen. And that's the same for some of the FIs who may be using a portal like eVero. You still have to do a budget amendment to capture like the increases. So just with that caveat, I'm going to share the screen here. And then this is a template. Again, hopefully all you folks have a budget, or maybe you're in startup and you're about to get a budget, but hopefully you'll have a budget. And you'll see on here, I left out, this is actually Alex's budget, but I took a lot of information out, obviously. So I'm just going to go through the tabs at first, and I'll kind of go through them quickly and tell you what some of the things are in the budget. And then we can either do some Q&A, or what I like to do actually with the budget is try to think of creative ways to get all the money in your pocket. Like in this budget here, we can look over here. I don't know if you guys can see like my cursor on the screen when I'm moving it around like that, Hannah? You can.
We can see it, yep.
Okay, excellent. So that you'll see here that both PRA. PRA stands for personal resource account. That's the total amount of the budget, right? And in this case, it's $125,392. So I always tell my clients, my goal is to get that $125,392 or close to it in your pocket at the end of the fiscal year, because that's the goal. You want to get that benefit. How you get it is a question of like manipulating the numbers in the budget and what you're going to cover. And you don't have to spend it, you know, you don't get penalized for not using that. But the goal is to get $125,000 worth of benefit. So I usually talk in iterations, and if you were on the previous talks, I would have said the same thing, which is you want to get a budget, you want to use the whole budget, and then you want to use the budget efficiently. Some things are more efficient or easier to get than others in the budget, and like don't make your lives more difficult than it needs to be. So that's going to be sort of my theme in the background here. But just going through the template again at the top, pretty self-explanatory, the demographic information for the individual, where they live and everything. Now here, I'm going to show you something here. So here it says Rockland County up here, which is actually not right. This is actually our zip code, which is in Manhattan. But if you watch the PRA here, you know, if we change Rockland County to what it's supposed to be, New York City, that should go up, and it didn't. It stayed to 25. That's kind of strange. That's not good. Why did that not increase? Oh, here we go. See, I also have to change it over here. Let's change this to New York. Now you'll see it's 135, right? So there's a geographic component to it. So you can see right there, if you're in upstate somewhere, at least in Rockland County in that example, and then you move to Manhattan, you get another $10,000, and vice versa if you move. So one component of what creates the PRA is your geography, where you live, this county up here, and then where the budget, where the DDRO is here. And Stephanie's the Manhattan DDRO. She just retired. If you guys are in Manhattan, Eric Pfeiffer, who was also working with Stephanie, is basically running the show there now. I don't know if they're bringing in someone to help him, but he's the only name I've been seeing and communicating with there. So geography, one component of the budget amount. Another component of the budget amount, this question here, is the individual less than 22 residing with parent or guardian receiving services from the school district? Essentially, you know, if you say yes, meaning you're eligible to receive services from the Board of Ed, your budget's $54,000, right? And that's typical. That's a typical school age budget for someone in this city. If you're graduate, you know, at 18 or 21, 135. Again, this is on the old template. It's larger on the new template. But anyway, those are other factors that go into it. So again, geography, essentially age or eligibility for school services. And then the final component are these DDP2 scores up here. So you'll see adaptive health and behavior scores. Those will be your most sensitive factors and probably the only ones that are going to change regularly. Now, the DDP2 stands for Developmental Disability Profile Number 2. Most of you folks have budgets, so you may know this already. That's a questionnaire you're supposed to do every other year with your care manager, and ideally your broker would be involved. You don't have to have the FI, but they can be involved too if you want. It's kind of up to you. I've been telling clients lately that, you know, the care manager is not supposed to do the DDP2 on their own, because what I see happening is the care manager does the DDP2 on their own. The broker doesn't know, and your innocent broker goes and puts in a budget amendment, gets rejected because they're saying, no, there's new scores. I'm like, I didn't know. They send me the new scores, you know, and instead of like 219 there's like 50 there. You know, and next thing you know, we're out like $40,000. And I'm like, what's going on? And then you have to yell at people and send emails and put people's supervisors on the emails and get them to fix the DDP2. So the DDP2 is important. You know, it's pretty quick. It's a 15-minute, should be a 15-minute Q&A. It may not change that much. You know, if there is a change like that, you know, if this change is like $45,000, that doesn't make any sense, right? Someone probably didn't improve that much over 1 or 2 years. Either the previous DDP2 or most likely the current one was either done incorrectly. There might have been a typo when they scored it. The care manager has to score it, or they may have done it without your input, which again, they're not allowed to do. They're definitely not allowed to do. They're doing it all the time. I'd say at least a third of them are being done without input. So, you know, don't allow that, and they have to redo it. If the scores change that much, like I just showed you guys on there, then it has to be redone. You know, in that scenario, ideally you would tell a care manager to do it, or the broker, I would tell a care manager to do it. You know, if they're not responsive, they're like, oh, we can only do it 2 other years. I'm like, then we got to contact the supervisor too and get them on the email. And if that person gives you a problem, which does happen from time to time, then you look up who's your CCO agency, you know, ACA, Tri-County, or Care Design if you're in the city. Maybe Life Plan if you're in the Hudson Valley area or parts of Long Island. Then you Google Care Design regional directors, and then you add that person on the email too, and then you'll get a response. So again, I've had this happen like 3 times in the last month, literally. Care manager cannot do the DDP2 on their own. You know, the one caveat being is if you tell the care manager, hey, there's no change year over year, let them put in the same results and then get the same score. You know, because from the broker perspective, I'm looking to protect the clients like money, you know, that they're getting the same amount of money. Also, you know, I've had clients who, you know, it's a, you know, it's certainly not a, I'm just trying to think of the word, you know, it's a, you know, terrible, someone starts having a seizure, for instance, or has some other medical problems. That might be a reason to do a DDP2 before the next due date, right? Because that some of the questions may change, and that's you know, if you start having seizures, basically you're going to get about $7,000 more. So it may make sense to redo the DDP2. So the DDP2 can be done more frequently than 2 years, as you know, and you're going to do that if there's errors or something changes. And if anyone gives you a tough time with that, you know, then you copy people on the email, which would be supervisor, if necessary, regional director, the FI, the DDRO. You know, they're going to do it. You know, basically that's what they get paid to do. They're not really doing anything, the care manager. The least they could do is spend 15 minutes doing a DDP2 and making it done right.
Can I interrupt
I'm
with a
preaching there.
question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, thank you. So Cameron said, hello, thanks so much for these presentations. I've learned so much. My brother is 33 and has Down syndrome. He moved to New York City in February and just accepted a room in a house run through the Block Institute. They'll be taking over as his SS payee and get paid through the state. I'm curious if there's a hybrid model of self-direction where the individual lives in agency-run housing.
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, it is possible, and that's actually good because it's coming up to my next part of the budget template. So I'll mention there how that, it may not make sense, but I'll tell you how it's possible to do that. So yes, there is a hybrid, you know, you can kind of have, so self-direction is maybe the new, you know, model. And again, it's not necessarily for everyone, but then there's more of like what we'll call like the legacy or traditional services, right? More of like day group home type of situation. But it is possible to have some combination of, you know, day group home, and this is going to be sort of the next factor in the budget. So this both PRA, it's called both because that's the type of budget. There's actually 3 types of budget, and you would use a particular type of budget. Most people use it both. That'll give you the largest amount. But there's 3 types of budgets based on the individual's circumstances. So if someone's living in a certified setting, you're going to change that budget type. Or if someone's going to day hab more than 2 days a week, you may choose another budget type. The 3 budget types are both. And I don't know why they call them these titles. That doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, both means it's the most common budget. If you're in self-direction, you get the largest amount of money. You're not in a day hab, or at least not going to a day hab full time, and you're not living in a certified setting, to our friend's question here. Now here, when you check this, or your broker checks this, here's the other budget types. Residential only, I'll start with that first, and then we'll come to other than residential. I don't know why they call it that, which will be kind of to, I think it was Cameron's question. So residential only, you'll see this disappeared and it jumped over here to PRA residential, this 104, right? So the budget went down. All we changed was the budget type, the budget went down. Now, the reason why you would want to use maybe a residential only budget instead of a both PRA is if the individual is going to a day hab program more than 3 times a week. So a day hab, most of your day habs, at least in the city, they cost probably about $54,000 a year, right? And if you have a both budget, $54,000 has to come out of this 135, okay, or give about, and they probably increase that amount too. But let's say 54 has got to come out of there. If you change it to residential only, then the budget doesn't have to pay the $54,000. It gets paid directly by Medicaid, The FI doesn't even pay it, but they have to account for it, and we have to account for some of that. So we choose residential only. So you'll see, because of that, you get about $20,000 extra at the end of the day. If you're going to a day hab and you don't use you can keep a both budget, right? But if you're going to pay $54,000 out of this, doesn't make any sense when you could do this, and then you don't have to pay the $54,000 out of the budget, right? So that's what the purpose of the residential only budget is. And usually you can play with the math. There's slightly different prices for certain day habs, and there's some specialized day habs. Like a couple of my clients started going to like these art focused day habs. You can run the numbers. If someone's going to go 1 or 2 days a week, it usually makes sense to keep it a both budget and pay for the budget, pay for the day hab out of the budget. And we'll come to that. There's another tab called direct provider purchase. That's where you would put the day hab. But if you're going to go more than 2 days a week, usually the math works out 3 days or more, you choose the residential only budget, right? So that's sort of a hybrid component right there. The final piece is the OTR budget. And we're going to see this jump around again, right? So now it's over here, PRA, OTR, $30,000, right? So big difference. You're basically losing $135,000. And if you noticed on the residential only down here, you'll see these categories, which are the optional categories of where you could spend. They're going to change. So when you have a both, pretty much everything's there, right? If you change to residential, there's a little bit of a restriction. And when you go to other than residential, when you go to other than residential, there's a lot of restrictions, right? So you have a lot less money, but there's a lot less stuff you can spend it on. But other than residential is if you're in a certified setting, right? If you're living in a certified setting. So you'll see, you get a lot less money, but it's still $30,000, and you can use it for certain things on here. Now you can't use, when the individual's in the certified setting, like they're living in the home, you can't pay for extra comm hab, because there's staff there. This is more for like weekends, or maybe they're out doing something during the day that's not a day hab. You can spend stuff on that. And then there's direct provider purchase I mentioned before. That's where the day hab would fit in. So I'm going to stay away from that. But you'll see, you could spend money on IDGS, which includes classes and some other things. You can have a broker, and you can have staff, but again, they can't be working at the same time as the individuals in the certified setting. So it is possible to do that. You would want to run the numbers, with the broker, and it also depends, like, what do you want to potentially spend with the budget, but it is possible to have a hybrid approach.
I do have another question, Ken.
Yeah.
So someone is asking, how do I switch brokers? Can I hire you? This is our first time using self-direction. We are so lost. Our budget resets in February and we haven't used much of our budget, and now we are scrambling. Any suggestions? Okay.
Well, the first thing I'd say is you can always change your broker. I'm not, like Hannah mentioned at the beginning, I have like 125 cases right now. So unfortunately, I'm not taking any other cases right now, because it's just, my email, if I was emailing with you right now, there's a 3 on there, which means it's going to take me 3 days to see your email. So I don't like it getting too much. I don't like it getting too much beyond that. But I can give you, if you want to email the Gigi's team, I can give you guys, Hannah, like the name of a broker that I'm kind of mentoring. And she's a special needs mom, and she used to work as an FI, and she's the one I'm referring cases to right now. In the future, I may take more cases, but because every once in a while, like in the past year, I had one client moved to a certified setting, so they didn't need the budget anymore. Someone moved to Connecticut. And this is actually interesting. Not this person who moved to Connecticut, but another person in Connecticut was looking to get self-direction. They have a similar program. If my son was in Connecticut, he'd get $22,000 instead of $135,000. So there's kind of a big difference. So again, Connecticut's a pretty nice state. You can move there, but it makes a big difference over the course of 40 years. It may pay, but just to add that in there. But yes, you can always change your broker. I would say, we can definitely get into it a little bit more, but One thing, part of the question was, don't stress about spending the money. You definitely want to get the money and use the budget. Yes. But don't, there's no penalty for not using the budget, and don't make it try not to make it a stressful thing, right? You're getting sort of a benefit here, and it shouldn't be stressful. I know it can be, but it shouldn't be stressful. The broker, the question is, is the broker, I'm not sure what the issue is. And if you want to kind of go into that a little bit, but the broker, if the broker's not responsive, and by not responsive, I mean I mentioned like 3 days is my queue. Originally I used to tell people like 24 hours, but it's a large volume of information that comes in every day now. And by that, I mean like emails. So it's, I think if you're working with a broker, if they're not responsive at all, most of them are not going to really know what they're doing, especially if they're new. I had this question today. Someone asked me, how should I interview a broker? Like they just took the information session. I got a list of brokers. How do I determine which one was there? And I would say, if I was interviewing a broker, I would say, which FIs do you work with? Because a lot of brokers work with one FI. If they only work with one FI, that kind of tells me they don't really know that much, right? Because different individuals may make more sense at one FI versus another. They're not all exactly the same. So there's reasons why you would want to use one or the other. And that would be one of if I was interviewing someone that was new, I was like meeting a family, I would say, what do you guys want to use the budget for? And if you don't know, it's totally fine. But if you're like, oh, we want to do this program and we want to pay this amount of money for staff, we want these benefits, then I'd like, oh, let's choose one of these 2 or 3. And then you guys, meaning the family, call the FI and maybe interview them and see which one you feel better with. Or a lot of times people just say, just tell me which one to pick. And sometimes it depends which FI is open. But that would be one conversation to have with a broker. And also a broker should get back to you periodically. If the broker doesn't know a lot, and I don't know what the problem is in this particular case, but if the broker doesn't know a lot, as long as they're willing to ask someone, either ask the FI, or ask the DDROs. The DDROs know that, know their stuff. If you may just have to wait a little bit longer with it, right? So, and again, the training for the brokers is really minimal. I know some of the folks on here have probably done the training. It's free, and you could do it yourself. But you really only learn by doing this. So I was just kind of talking around the question there. But if the person who wrote that wants to say what the specific problem is with the broker, they can, we can have a follow-up to that. But if not, if they're just looking for someone else, we can go through Gigi's and I can provide you the name of someone who I know is taking cases right now. And I think that they're pretty solid. And at least I know that they ask questions. So there actually is like a broker mentor program that OPWDD has. And I actually had signed up for it, but it's not really worthwhile. Like it's there's no benefit to me really. So like, why should I do it? You get training credits for doing it, but I go way over the training credit anyway, like from these online courses that I take. So there's no benefit there. And there's a lot of paperwork to actually do to get these extra credits. And it's like, it doesn't make sense if you think about it. So I'm not sure who's doing the broker mentoring, but there are mentors. So if your broker doesn't really know, maybe they should ask, their DDRO who are mentors in my region. I actually want to do something about that too, like have some sort of professional organization that, and I actually wrote something to OPWDD, so I don't know if they're going to listen to me, but something where OPWDD seeds a professional organization, kind of like the CPA, or there's something called the CFA, which is if you work on Wall Street, that's like Chartered Financial Analyst. That's kind of the big deal to get, where you basically take these exams. It's sort of self-funded. You have to pay to take the exams and pay dues. But then usually when you get that, you can make more money, and you actually have a fiduciary responsibility to put your client ahead of, making more money, getting them to buy a particular security or make a particular investment. Right. And that's probably what they should do with the broker role eventually. But I'll move on from that. But certainly if you want to ask more questions about that, we can talk about that.
There is a question about hybrid, same question as the hybrid res one, but about employment.
Okay. You mean if like someone has a job? like a
I think
full-time
that's
job?
what the question means. I don't know if you want to chime in, Allison.
Yeah, hey Ken.
Hey,
I love that idea that you were talking about. Also, we should do that with the DSPs too.
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, self-direction in employment, I find is hard to do. So same question about kind of like, if you're self-directing, but then you get SEMP, how does it eat up? Like I'm looking at direct provider purchase, which is probably where you're going next anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, that's my question.
Yeah. No, and I'm going to go there. And I like you said, it's definitely difficult to get. It's definitely difficult for individuals to get jobs, but when the people have jobs, I've had a couple people who have had either their own SEMP worker through the FI, or they're doing something with like job path. And when they're doing it through job path, like they're doing like a job training type of thing, right? And then basically you wind up with a second staff action plan for this SEMP worker, right? And in this case, like I have a couple cases with job path, right? So I have a couple people who are doing that. So the circle of support it's actually pretty good. The circle of support gets bigger. There's more people involved, but not everyone's going to have a paid for job. But is the question, Allison, like how that works in the budget?
Yeah, I guess like if someone was going from, pre-voc to either pathway or supported employment, how does that affect the numbers, and how long does it take to do a budget amendment to go from one to the next?
Yeah. And that's a good question. I actually haven't had to do that. I have people using supported employment here, but I haven't had anyone switching between those. And that's, and again, I have 100+ cases, and I have, I'm just trying to think. It's not 8 years, but it's probably like 7 years being a broker, but the first 2 years almost don't count. What I'm going to say is let's kind of play with that and see what the template tells us, because the template usually knows like you can try to figure it out and see if you can make it work. It's not always right though, because there's one little thing, and I don't know that they fixed it. This is the old template, so I have to check it on a new template, but there's and I'm just going to give you a quick example here. I'm going to the IDGS tab. There's something called transition program for individuals with IDD, and I'm just going to blank these out. Theoretically, you could put $32,000 here, right? This is the old template, so I know it's going to work. There's no way you can spend $32,000 on this line. Usually there's caps, like Health Club is $1,500, right? If I try to put $2,000 in there, whoops, you can't do it, right? This one, you could put all $32,000 there, but the rules, when you look at the rules and you actually try to go to like reimburse it, it's like $800 a month. So this one, they should actually change. I don't know why they do that. So with that caveat, we can kind of play with this and see what happens, right? So is this, so in this, go ahead, Allison.
I would back it up, like for parents on here, it's like, how do you know what I always find so crazy about going through the process is they're like, so which services would you like? And you're like, it's like going to a restaurant, they don't give you a menu. It's like, I don't know. Well, what are the choices? What do you guys have? Can you explain to me? So like, how would a parent know or an adult know to pick pre-voc or pathway or SEMP, and kind of what's the best bang for your buck in self-direction with those?
Yeah. I mean, so if someone's a new client, right, we're going to interview what do you want to do? And they may not know. They may say, I want to get a job, right? A lot of people want to get a job. What kind of job do you want to get? Like, is it going to be a volunteer type of job? Or is it someone who could actually, like, the purpose of SEMP is someone can work with because SEMP's not supposed to be permanent, right? It's like supposed to be, I think it's like a year or 18 months. And then they're supposed to be able to go out on their own. So that may or may not be feasible for most people, but that's the way SEMP is supposed to go. Now, the SEMP in the direct provider purchase, the SEMP that I've experienced in the Medicaid funded is a little bit more flexible. Now, a lot of the FIs aren't doing SEMP anymore because they kind of lose money on that line. That's what they kind of tell me, right? So that's kind of going away. But when they were doing it, the SEMP there could be extended. Like basically it was a higher paid ComHab worker to go and help you do work. Now here in the direct provider purchase, again, it's supposed to be a temporary role, like the SEMP worker's temporary, to get the individual acclimated, and then they're eventually supposed to phase out. So I don't know how, I definitely have some people who could do that. I have some people who have jobs on their own, right? But they didn't need that hand-holding phase. So that's really it's so specific that I'm just trying to think, like, it's so, again, it's so specific that it's, you know, it's less than 1%, you know, of my experience. Like, it's, you know, 2 people out of 125, and they still have it in place because they had a job and then they kind of lost the job, or the job went away, and then they found them another job and they have it again, and they found another job and they have it again. So that might be one way it stays in there. So I think it depends on the individual. If the individual is capable of totally working on their own, you know, we would try to do this, the direct provider purchase SEMP, and then hopefully send them on their way. If it's more akin where the individual wants to work and they can work, but they're probably going to always need some level of support, then we're going to try to find an FI that's still providing SEMP, or maybe get a little bit more creative and maybe have like ComHab helping somehow, you know, depending on who the employer is. Like, they may be okay with that. That's probably the easiest way to do it. So again, when I come back to, you know, make your life more easy, and what's the easiest way to do things, you know, ComHab might be the way to go. Of course, you have to find an employer who is okay with having an extra person there. So I don't know if that's directly an answer to Allison, but like that's kind of like my thought of how to attack that. Like, the individual, what level of support do they need, and do they always need it? And then we would choose, you know, one or more of those categories. You know, I always like, and I haven't had to, I have a couple people who either have jobs or they're capable of having some level of job, but this just doesn't come up as much. You know, hopefully like a few more years from now, I'll have like maybe a better answer for you, or maybe things will be, maybe the structure will be a little bit different and we can describe things a little bit differently. But if someone's always going to need support, I'm thinking ComHab, and try to figure out how to get that in the job. And if we're going to be able to pass them off, and it's just really getting to learn the job, then it would be supported employment. Like one of my clients, and she's relatively new, in the past, before I was her broker, she did have supported employment with SEMP, and she started doing some work. Now she switched the job, and then the SEMP went away. And then she switched the job a couple of times, but she hasn't had to go back and take SEMP because she kind of learned like the structure of going to work in like this artistic field, like she does art related work. So that's like a success story for SEMP there. And I don't think she worked with JobPath. I'm not sure who the provider was, who the direct provider was there.
That answers the
But yeah.
question. I think the big hole is always who's doing the job development, you know?
Yep. And it's, you know, that could be, one, I'm just thinking like, so I haven't really had, some of my clients will say, can I get a job? I'm like, yes. Do you want to talk to someone about getting a job? And I'll say JobPath, right? And I like JobPath. JobPath's also an FI, so just so you guys know. So I have some cases there, but some people like JobPath is like, it's like the best thing ever. And a couple other people were like, they weren't able to help me, right? But that may just be a function of like the market. But I am seeing like more, I think there's more opportunities out there now for folks. And there's a couple like community classes that are providing like job-like experiences that are maybe like a job, but maybe there's not an income, right? Like it's a not-for-profit, so there's not an income there. So again, that may come back to the individual. Like what do you want? What do you want to do? Like a couple clients are, I don't really like the terminology, but they're super high functioning, right? Like they're going to be lawyers. They're going to college on their own with ComHab staff, right? And that's they're going to college with ComHab staff because they need like physically the support. But they're going to be working. They're going to be lawyers making a lot of money probably at some point. And they're still going to have a budget to pay for some stuff. They're probably not going to have housing or SSI at some point because they'll be making too much money. But that's a way to, I think a good description, because coming back to the beginning of this question, the previous question, like the flexibility of like the budget. It can be flexible if you kind of start doing what we're kind of doing right now. Let's think about the individual situation. What's the best model? And we came up with a few different options here, depending on a person who wants a job, like their level of capability that you can do. So, that's why I really like working, figuring these kinds of problems out with, it's not really a problem, but these challenges out with the budget. And that's also why I really like this service, because really not everyone's going to, have a budget. Some people need, a higher level of support. They maybe need 24/7 care, or they need to be in a more assisted living type of situation. The budget may not make sense for them outside of like, the OTR example that we mentioned earlier. You might be able to pay for some extra stuff out of there, and that's great too. But I think for most people, if the team starts thinking outside, maybe what's the most common use of the budget, it's like, the most common things is staff, of course, yes, but everyone wants to find staff. But then, the other things are classes, that's popular too, and like clothing. I'm like, okay, let's think about other things you can do, and that's great. Again, as long as you're getting this 120 or 135 or whatever it is, I'm happy. As long as you're getting that, I'm happy. Like the team or the family's getting that in their pocket.
We do have 2 more questions, Ken.
Okay,
I don't know
yeah.
if you are you okay with doing them now?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Let me see what else is on this tab, and then we'll do the other couple questions. So we talked about the components that go into the PRA, because I just want to make sure we cover
Yeah, no,
certain things,
definitely.
right? And we talked about like how the PRA is generated, and we saw the different types of budgets, right? And then we had some examples here of like how we can do maybe some creative stuff here. And then just quickly here again, if you guys don't look at it, here's some more information, right? Like your FI, your broker, and your care manager. And then I'm going to take the question. So right down here though, just so you guys know, sometimes I get this. If you ever want to know when your annual effective date is, right? When your fiscal year, here it is right here. When you first get your initial budget, this date is put on here, and it's always going to be the same. It's always going to be 11/1. It's always going to be 11/1, unless I'm scrolling up here, unless you change the budget type. If you change the budget type to like residential, and then the residential budget gets approved on 10/1, this will get changed to 10/1. So your fiscal year always stays the same unless you change the budget type. That changes the fiscal year as well. So just one important note there for planning purposes, if you ever wind up changing the budget. The transmittal date, that's the date. I don't know why they even put that in there. That's the date OPWDD, approved the latest budget amendment, or CNBA, or full budget amendment, called the FBA if it went in. And then the amendment date is when the amendment is effective. So in this example here, what this means is this individual's fiscal year is 11/1. So the budget resets every 11/1, refills to the current accounts as of whatever they were for 10/31. It doesn't go back to your initial budget. And then the amendment date is if you had a cost neutral amendment or a full amendment, and I think we'll get to those, what the difference is, if you guys don't know. That's when this new budget that we have here that OPWDD gave us, that's when this new allocation or the new budget amount, whatever changed, that's when that's effective from. It's always the first of the month. The transmittal date is that's just when they approved it and sent it out. So in this scenario here, this budget amendment was approved on the 4th of February, but it's effective February 1st, because they're going to pick usually the first of the month of wherever it's closer. So if they had worked on this on the 16th or 17th, today, if they did a budget amendment, it's probably going to be a 12/1 effective date. So yeah, let's do the next question. I just wanted to make sure we covered all of the first tab at least.
Thank you. So one question is, what is the difference between ComHab and respite? And then
Okay.
the other question is, are there FIs more suited to different age groups?
Okay, so that's a good question about the age group. Let me think about that, and then we'll go to the second tab, which is very timely that this question came up, because that's the next tab. So let's see. Any FI better for certain age groups? I'm just thinking about that. I haven't had that question come up. If someone's younger, Well, okay, let's think about it this way. I wouldn't necessarily break it down that way, but maybe this is one way to think about it, which is if the individual's older and they have a graduation budget, right? And they have the $135,000 budget like we have here. There are some FIs that have tiered fringe rates. So fringe rate, and I'll get into that now here. The fringe rate is basically an add-on to the hourly wage that basically goes to the FI. It's not like they make the money. It goes to a pooled account at the FI, and they use that to cover the cost of benefits. It sort of benefits the FI in that pooled account can pay for their own staff's benefits, but that's the way it works. So some FIs have a flat fringe rate, like this one here is the fringe rate for RCIL. It's 28.5%. So you'll see in this example here, and then I'll talk about the differences in staff. In this example here, ComHab, and you can put whatever title you want here. I usually just do this, like it's just easier, ComHab 1, whatever. Sometimes you can put the individuals' names on here. When you submit the budget, they usually don't want the names on there, but to keep track of, like, if you have a whole bunch of workers, it's sometimes helpful to have it located somewhere, right? So you might have two budgets, one that you submit and one that you kind of play with the staff names. But anyway, so let's say ComHab 1, we're paying that person $30 an hour and they're working full time, right? 40 hours is the max they could work per week. And we're going to say they're working 50 weeks a year, right? So they're going to get $60,000, right? The fringe rate, which, like I said, is add-on to cover the cost of benefits, brings you up to $77,000. And you'll see the hourly unit cost here of $38.55. The $38.55 is what comes out of the budget on an hour, on an hourly basis, not the 30, the $38.50. So if you have a graduation budget and you have multiple full-time people, this is what you're going to pay out of here. Now, if you have a lot of part-time people, RCIL has a flat fringe rate of 28.5. Some FIs may have a 14% fringe rate or an 18% fringe rate, right? So this may make a big difference in your budget amount over the course of the year. It was like $3 and change, right? For each hour. And it's 2,000 annual hours, right? So one thing you may want to do is, if you're in that situation where you're deciding, like on FIs, if I'm talking to someone and we're talking about staff, there might be benefits. Some FIs have different benefit packages than others. Like they may have a better insurer, or they may have a 401k with a match. That's kind of a nice benefit. But there's also tiered fringe rates. There might be an 18% fringe rate. There might be a 14%. There might be a 25% at the FI. And that may affect, it may not make a difference, but it may say, if we choose, I like CFS, they're an FI. If CFS has a full-time fringe rate of 36% if the worker has health insurance, right? So here's what's coming out of the budget. Here, $40.80, $81,000 for this worker, right? At Braverhood, I think they just said they're lowering their fringe rate. It's going to be 20%. So it's 81,000, 72,000, right? So that's a pretty sizable difference there, depending on the benefit packages and all. So not that you would make solely your decision based on that, but if you're running out of money as you're doing your allocation in all these different areas, that may be one consideration to choose one FI. Or even maybe you have an FI that has a 14% fringe rate, for part-time, like CFS, again, not to pick on them, but they have a 14% fringe rate for part-time. So you got to be working like 14 or 15 hours a week. Let's make it 14, right? And now you're graduating and you want this worker to work full-time. They'll work full-time for you. But then, and they also want health insurance. And now you're like, oh, we don't have money to pay for enough classes and that kind of stuff. Maybe you want to change your FI. CFS, don't get mad at me. Maybe you want to change your FI to another one where, you got an extra $7,000 per each staff line if you have a couple people working full time. So that would be, one way to think about how to choose an FI. Again, not that would be your sole decision making, but you can also change FIs. Like I mentioned before, if your broker's no good, you could change your broker, but there might be reasons why you would choose one FI over another, and it might have to do with the numbers. So you can run the numbers from the different FIs. FIs. The thing is, like, the fringe rate will change from time to time. And again, some FIs have a flat fringe rate, some have 2 fringe rates, some have 4. So the range I see is a single fringe rate up to 4 different fringe rates, depending on the amount of hours worked from a staff person. So it can get kind of complicated. So you may want to take your spreadsheet out at home and plug in the different numbers and see which one benefits you most.
I
But
do have
to the
one more question.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if you were finished.
No, that's okay. I was going to start talking about the difference between ComHab and respite, but you can ask the question. Yeah,
Oh.
maybe that's going to be the next question. Okay.
Well, that was a question, but then we have
Okay,
another question. Can I, my budget says 20 hours a week. Can I change it to 40? Is this done through an amendment?
You have to, yes. So if this is going to, I'll say yes, you have to do that. It kind of depends also on the FI and the fringe rate. Now, if you're going to change the rate of pay, so one strategy sometimes is to have a couple different rates of pay in here if you're not using all the money, right? If you hire a new person and you're like, oh, we're going to have them start at 22 and you already have $22 in the budget, once they're set up, which is its own process, they can start working. But if you have someone working at 22 and you want to increase their wage to 25 and you don't have 25 in the budget, you have to do a budget amendment to put that rate in there. The number has to be in the budget. The hours per week, though, that's the individual's question here is, so if you have someone working, 20 hours here and you want to increase to 40, what I'll say is, again, it kind of depends on the FI, but if it's the scenario where someone's making $30 and you're working however many weeks per year, but they're working 20 weeks. If it's a flat fringe rate, like 25% fringe rate at the FI, and you're going to increase the hours, you can probably increase the hours before you do a budget amendment, especially if like the worker only just started and you've only used like a few weeks, per year. It's not like you're